The 2010s were an exciting era of football. The decade coincided with a lot of the rule changes that have shaped the game into what we know it to be today.
Good one! Wheel back!
And you know what? The NFL was filled with guys who absolutely dominated, players who made you stop what you were doing and watch every snap. They were the Pro Bowlers, All-Pros, MVP candidates, players that lit up the stat sheets and made huge differences for their teams, and in some cases contributed to championships, only then to vanish from the minds of fans once their playing days came to an end. So, without further ado, how about we dive into the 10 NFL superstars from the 2010s that you already forgot about. Chris Harris Jr. Chris Harris Jr. might be the greatest undrafted defensive back in NFL history, and somehow nobody talks about him anymore. Undrafted out of Kansas in 2011, signed by the Broncos as a free agent, became arguably the best slot corner in the league during his prime. 4 Pro Bowls, named to the NFL 2010s All-Decade Team alongside Von Miller, the only Broncos to ever make it. Super Bowl 50 champion, where he had 5 solo tackles and a sack in the biggest game of his life. He was a part of the no-fly zone secondary that defined Denver's defense. Yeah, sure, he wasn't the flashiest name, but he was the most reliable. Then, age caught up, and after 2019, Denver entered rebuild mode. Harris crossed over to the rival Chargers on a 2-year, $20 million deal. He played out his contract, then spent his final season with the Saints in 2022, before quietly signing a 1-day contract to retire as a Bronco. He just got older and quietly faded away from the conversation. Patrick Willis. Our younger viewers may not know the name, but Patrick Willis was one of the most dynamic linebackers that the game has ever seen. 7 consecutive Pro Bowls, 5 first-team All-Pro selections, NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year, the first rookie linebacker to make All-Pro since Dick Butkus in 1965, named to the NFL 2010s All-Decade Team. The list of accolades goes on and on. This man probably would have still dominated, but here's the thing, his body just didn't cooperate. A nagging toe injury plagued him for years. He played through it because, well, that's just what someone with Patrick Willis's mental toughness and psychological makeup does. But in 2014, after missing the final 10 games of the season, doctors told him that his feet were hanging on by a thread, and the 49ers' longtime linebacker decided that he was done. Willis retired on March 10th of 2015 at 30 years old. Still in his prime, still one of the best players in all of football. When Patrick Willis was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2024, he didn't even talk about football. He talked about surviving his challenging childhood and about what it took to get from there to Canton. Who knows, maybe that's why we forgot about him. He didn't fade away or have a dramatic fall that garnered our attention, he just left and calmly let us all just move on. Eric Berry. Man, this is a tough one. Eric Berry beat cancer, and then his body betrayed him anyway, and it just feels like everyone kinda forgot about one of the craziest stories that we've seen in recent years. 2014, the Kansas City Chiefs safety was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at 25 years old and underwent chemotherapy during the offseason. Most players would have just taken a year off, because, you know, chemo ain't easy. But Berry came back the very next season. And he made the Pro Bowl, and won first-team All-Pro, and won Comeback Player of the Year. In 2017, he signed a 5-year, $78 million contract, the largest ever for a safety. Everything was finally paying off. Then, he ruptured his Achilles. Then, he developed Haglund's deformity, a bone spur digging into the tendon. He played just 3 games over the next 2 seasons. The Chiefs ultimately released him in March of 2019, and he never played again. No fanfare, no closure, the man just disappeared. Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was as explosive as it got coming out of the backfield for the Rams. It felt like he was going to be the face of the NFL for years to come. I mean, think back to that 2017 season. He put up over 2,000 total yards and 19 touchdowns. He won Offensive Player of the Year. He finished second in MVP voting. He was 23 years old and looked like he'd be unstoppable for the next decade. There was just one little problem. His knee had other plans. Gurley developed arthritis in his left knee stemming from a torn ACL that he suffered at Georgia in 2014, and it just kept getting worse and worse, stealing from the prime of one of the game's most exciting players. A prime example was in Super Bowl 53, Rams vs. Patriots, where he got 10 carries for 35 yards and the Rams lost 13-3. Everyone was asking the same question: why did the best player on the team disappear in the biggest game? Well, the answer was his knee. The Rams were trying to protect him, but they weren't willing to admit it publicly. In March of 2020, the Rams released Todd Gurley. He was 25 years old, one of the best running backs in the league, but his body was just already done. He played one more disappointing season with the Falcons, then was out of football entirely, officially announcing his retirement in October of 2022 at 28 years old. From near MVP to out of the league in 18 months, all because of a knee that just couldn't hold up. And then, everyone just seemingly forgot what an electric player that he really was. Vontaze Burfict. Look, Vontaze Burfict is not a sympathetic figure, but you can't talk about the 2010s without talking about him. In fact, there was a time that you couldn't turn on sports radio without hearing about Burfict. He had a switch that he just couldn't turn off, and despite being otherwise well-liked, he was one of the most feared and violent linebackers in all of football. Prime example being the hit on Antonio Brown back in 2016 that got him suspended, something that he did plenty of during his playing days. He racked up 22 games worth of suspensions across his career, over $5 million in fines. And in 2019 with the Raiders, he received the longest suspension for on-field conduct in NFL history. 12 whole games, the rest of the season. He was officially reinstated in 2020, but nobody wanted him. In fact, he never even officially retired. The man just quietly went away. Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders played in 3 Super Bowls with 3 different teams. Not a lot of guys can say that, and yet today's fans still don't appreciate what a talented player he was. He started his career as a role player in Pittsburgh, stuck behind Antonio Brown and Mike Willis. Then he went to Denver and became Peyton Manning's go-to target. In 2014, he had his career year. 101 catches, 1,404 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Then he won Super Bowl 50, led all receivers with 6 catches for 83 yards. When Denver started to decline, he didn't hang around. Got traded to the 49ers midseason in 2019 and helped them reach Super Bowl 54. Lost that one to the Chiefs, though. His final stop was in Buffalo in 2021, but by then, he was 34 and clearly on his last legs. Emmanuel Sanders officially announced his retirement in September of 2022. Signed a ceremonial one-day contract to retire as a Bronco, and now works as an NFL Network analyst. So the man stays in the public conversation, but everyone seems to forget what a special player he truly was. 12-year career with 704 receptions and 9,245 yards. Won a championship, made some good money, then landed a media job. But nobody really talks about him anymore because, well, he wasn't exactly the biggest star on any of his teams. He was just the reliable guy. The professional, the player who showed up, produced, and moved on. Sometimes, well, that's just enough to be forgotten. Ryan Kerrigan. Ryan Kerrigan is Washington's all-time sack leader. Yeah, read that again. All-time sack leader. 95.5 sacks, more than anyone in franchise history. 26 forced fumbles, also the franchise record. 4 Pro Bowls, 172 career games over 11 seasons. And nobody noticed. Heck, I bet some of you don't even know or recognize this guy's name. This is not an exaggeration, but Ryan Kerrigan put together a haul of very good career in the nation's capital. And it barely even registered. Because, well, Washington was pretty darn bad. That team was always in turmoil. There was just always something else to talk about that was not the production on the field. Surprisingly though, he never demanded a trade or complained publicly. He just kept showing up and producing. When his skills finally declined, as they do for everyone, he played one final season with the Eagles in 2021. Then he signed a one-day contract to retire with Washington in July of 2022. Now, the man's an assistant linebackers coach for the Commanders. Still around the building, still contributing, still not getting talked about. Absolutely criminal. Kelechi Osemele. This one's pretty tough because the Jets destroyed this man's career over a surgery dispute. Osemele was a 2-time Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro in 2016 with the Raiders, Super Bowl 47 champion as a rookie with the Ravens, one of the best guards of his generation. But in March of 2019, he was traded to the Jets. And everything just fell apart, as it often does for players who have the misfortune of joining that cursed franchise. In October, Osemele suffered a shoulder injury. His doctors told him that he needed surgery. The Jets, though, disagreed. They said he just didn't need it. So, because they're the Jets, they started fining him for every single practice that he missed. They fined a player for being hurt. Think about that. Unsurprisingly, Osemele had the surgery anyway, and then the Jets released him immediately afterward. He tried to get things back on track in Kansas City when he signed with them ahead of the 2020 season, but he suffered tendon tears in both knees that ended his career. Osemele went from Super Bowl champion to All-Pro to salary dispute casualty to nothing. He never even officially announced his retirement. A genuinely unfortunate ending for a player who deserved much, much better. DeMarco Murray. DeMarco Murray was one of the better backs in the league for a while. He had one perfect season that ended up ultimately costing him the rest of his prime because, the Cowboys ran him into the ground. In 2014, Murray won Offensive Player of the Year. He led the NFL in rushing with 1,845 yards and 13 touchdowns. He broke Jim Brown's 1958 record for consecutive 100-yard games to start a season. 8 games. He even broke Emmitt Smith's Cowboys single-season rushing record. But here's the number that mattered most: 392 carries. Dallas rode him like they had no intention of keeping him, and they didn't. The Cowboys let Murray walk in free agency. He signed with the Philadelphia Eagles and ran straight into the Chip Kelly buzzsaw. 702 rushing yards, 3.6 yards per carry, a shell of himself. Some combination of Kelly's authoritarian coaching and the 392 carries from 2014 had just broken this man. He bounced back a little with the Tennessee Titans in 2016, AFC leading rusher with 1,287 yards, but by 2017, his body was completely done. The Titans released him in March of 2018, and he announced his retirement in July at 30 years old. Murray is a model for the cautionary tale for every single running back who gets overworked. One transcendent season, then the decline, and then the exit. Doug Baldwin. Despite not really being talked about much today, there was a time that Doug Baldwin was one of the most consistent wide receivers in the game. And he wasn't big or imposing, he wasn't a true burner. He just continually showed up on Sundays and made winning plays for winning teams. Baldwin had a real chip on his shoulder, the size of Seattle itself, where he played all 8 years of his career. He actually started as an undrafted free agent in 2011, despite leading Stanford in receiving yards. Why? Well, because Jim Harbaugh wrote him off as a selfish and uncoachable player. Teams heard those whispers and stayed far, far away. But you know, he proved every single doubter wrong. Baldwin became the poster child for Pete Carroll's uber-competitive philosophy, and was the first undrafted rookie to lead his team in receptions and receiving yards since the AFL-NFL merger. 2015, he set a franchise record with 14 receiving touchdowns. Plus, he was a part of that Super Bowl 47 winning team and made 2 Pro Bowls. A very solid career, especially for an undrafted player. But here's the thing about Doug Baldwin, well, he just was never the star. Everyone always talked about the Legion of Boom or Russell Wilson or Marshawn Lynch, but Baldwin was the guy who quietly produced while everyone else got the headlines. Then his body finally gave out. In 2018, he suffered an elbow injury in week 1 that plagued him all season. He underwent 3 procedures during the offseason. Shortly thereafter, he announced his retirement at 30 years old. Boom. That was it for the eternally underappreciated wideout. But hey, which of these superstars do you remember the least? Which of these guys actually stayed in your mind? Who else should have made this list? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, then hey, clicking that like button helps us out a ton. And you know, we really appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, then subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.